Okay, so you want to open a pet store to find a storefront, stock the shelves with food and toys, put a few puppies in the window, and watch families walk in and hand over their money. That's the picture in your head. A cute, simple, feel-good little business. Here's the problem. That picture is almost completely wrong. The animal in the window is very often the least profitable thing in the entire building. In a lot of stores, it barely breaks even, and sometimes it actually loses money once you count everything that goes into keeping it alive. The real business is something else entirely, and once you see it, you can never look at a pet store the same way again. Let's start with two customers walking through the same front door. The first one buys a purebred puppy for $2,000. Big number. Feels like a home run for the store. But now subtract what it actually cost to get that puppy onto the floor. The wholesale price paid to the breeder, the mandatory vet exam, the state license fee, days of isolation in a clean room so it doesn't catch anything from other animals, heating, lighting, a staff member feeding and cleaning up after it every single day it sits unsold. And then there's the risk that it gets sick and the store has to eat the entire cost as a loss. By the time all of that is subtracted, that $2,000 sale might net the store a few dollars of profit, or it might net nothing at all. The second customer buys a $25 bag of dog food. Small number. Looks boring next to the puppy. But that same customer comes back every 4 weeks for the next 14 years. That's over 180 bags of food, more than $4,500 in food alone, on top of treats, toys, flea medicine, and grooming visits along the way. Add it all up, and that one customer is worth somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 over the life of the relationship. So which customer is actually more valuable to the store? It isn't close. Let's actually run those numbers side by side, because this is where it gets interesting. The puppy sale brings in $2,000 of revenue, but after acquisition cost, licensing, vet checks, and daily care, the store might keep somewhere between $50 and negative $100 of that. Call it close to a wash either way. The food customer brings in $25 today, keeps roughly $8 or $9 of that as profit, and then repeats that same transaction, or something close to it, over 400 more times across 14 years. Multiply it out, and that single household is worth $18,000 or more in lifetime spending. Most of it pure profit margin on consumables and extras. One customer is a single transaction. The other is a subscription that happens to be delivered through a leash instead of an app. This is the first thing to understand about pet retail. The live animal isn't really the product. It's the doorway. It's what gets a person to walk in, fall in love, and sign up, without realizing it, for over a decade of recurring purchases. If selling pets isn't the real business, then what is? Think about almost anything else you buy. A pair of shoes, a television, a couch. You buy it once, and unless it breaks, you might not buy another one for years. Pets don't work that way. A dog or a cat has to eat every single day for its entire life, no matter what the economy is doing. That single fact turns pet food into one of the most reliable recurring revenue streams in all of retail. Now, not all pet food makes the same money. The basic bag of kibble sitting on the bottom shelf is priced to get people in the door, and it usually only earns the store 15 to 25 cents of profit on every dollar. It's a loss leader dressed up as a staple. But right next to it sits the premium wall, the grain-free, the freeze-dried, the human-grade formulas, and those bags routinely earn the store 35 to 50 cents of profit on every dollar. Same shelf, same customer, completely different profit story depending on which bag they pick up. And here's something most shoppers never think about. Those big brand displays at the end of the aisle, the ones that always seem to have the newest product front and center, manufacturers pay for that spot, sometimes $1,500. Sometimes as much as $25,000 for a single high-traffic location. The store is getting paid by the food company just to put the product where you'll see it first, and that placement alone can boost sales of that product by 20 to 45% compared to a spot buried in the middle of the aisle. So the shelf itself becomes a second business, quietly billing suppliers for your attention. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, this is a good moment to hit subscribe and like the video. It genuinely helps the channel keep making these. Now, food is just the entry point. Once an animal is in the home, it triggers a permanent shopping list. Beds, leashes, aquariums and filters, litter, vitamins, training tools, holiday costumes, of all things. Every single one of those items earns the store 40 to 60 cents of profit on every dollar spent, which is 2 to 3 times better than the margin on the food itself. This is why one dog, over its full lifetime, can generate tens of thousands of dollars in total purchases from a single household. The pet isn't the product being sold. The pet is the key that unlocks the customer. Which brings us back to the puppy in the window, and why stores keep selling them even when the animal itself barely turns a profit. It's emotional arbitrage. A person who has just fallen in love with a living, breathing puppy is not thinking like a careful shopper anymore. They need a crate. Call it $120. Starter food, $45. A bed, $60. Cleaning supplies for the inevitable accidents, $25. A collar, leash, and tags, $40. And some basic grooming tools, $50. Add that up, and you're at roughly $340 of add-on merchandise, on margins averaging around 50%. That basket alone can generate more real profit than the puppy sale itself. The animal loses money. The moment of emotion around the animal makes the money back, and then some. But keeping that animal alive long enough to sell it is far more expensive than most people assume. And this is where pet retail starts to look less like a shop and more like a small-scale hospital. A pair of sneakers on a shelf doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need its water changed. It doesn't need a veterinarian. A live animal needs all of that every day, whether it sells today or sits there for a month. Feeding, cleaning, and monitoring several times a day. Climate-controlled housing, because reptiles, birds, and tropical fish all need very specific temperatures and lighting to survive. Routine veterinary checks, and immediate treatment the moment something looks off, because diseases spread fast in close quarters. And then there's the cost nobody likes to say out loud. Some animals simply don't make it, and when that happens, the store loses everything it spent acquiring and caring for that animal, with nothing to sell at the end. Let's actually stack those costs up the way an accountant would. First, the wholesale acquisition cost from the breeder or supplier. Second, the mandatory health certificate and state licensing fees before the animal can even legally be displayed. Third, daily labor, because someone has to feed, clean, and check on that animal multiple times every single day it remains unsold, whether that's 1 day or 1 month. Fourth, utilities, because reptiles, birds, and tropical fish all need very specific heating, humidity, or lighting running around the clock, and that electricity bill doesn't pause just because business is slow. And finally, the mortality risks sitting underneath all of it, the chance that some percentage of that inventory simply doesn't survive to be sold at all. Add those 5 categories together and you get a number that climbs every single day the animal sits unsold. A bag of dog food sitting on a shelf for an extra month barely costs the store anything beyond a little bit of shelf space. A live animal sitting for an extra month can quietly erase its entire profit margin. The longer an unsold animal sits on the floor, the more it costs, and at a certain point the ongoing cost of keeping it alive actually exceeds what the store could even sell it for. That's the exact opposite of how a bag of dog food behaves sitting quietly on a shelf for a month, which is really the heart of the problem. A pet store isn't running one inventory system, it's running 2 at the same time in the same building. There's the ordinary inventory, food, leashes, toys, that just sits there, doesn't change much, and gets reordered on a predictable schedule. And then there's the living inventory, which can get sick, which can escape its enclosure, which requires labor every single day it's unsold, and which is bound by state and federal animal welfare rules that a bag of kibble never has to worry about. Ordering too few live animals means empty tanks and empty cages, which kills foot traffic. Ordering too many means crowded enclosures, faster disease spread, and higher losses. There's no clean formula for getting that balance right, and it's part of why so many independent stores struggle. And if you think dogs and cats are the complicated part of that equation, the aquarium section is usually worse. An aquarium display isn't just a tank with some fish in it. It's a closed, living life support system. The water has to be chemically balanced. The temperature has to be exact. The filtration has to keep working around the clock, because a single pump failure or a power outage can wipe out thousands of dollars of fish in a matter of hours. On top of that, tropical fish shipped in from overseas suppliers can lose somewhere between 5 and 15% of their numbers, just in transit, before they've even reached the store. Once they're in the tank, a single parasite outbreak can spread through the shared water system to every other tank connected to it. Stores that run aquatics don't actually make their money on the fish themselves. They make it on everything the fish requires. Filters, synthetic salt mixes, specialized lighting, and dosing equipment, much of which carries margins of 45 to 60 cents on the dollar. Some operators even track something as specific as revenue earned per gallon of water on display each month, because it tells them whether that whole wall of tanks is actually pulling its weight compared to the rest of the store, or just quietly burning electricity and labor. A healthy aquatics department usually needs to be pulling somewhere between $20 and $85 a month for every single gallon of water it's maintaining, just to justify the space and the staff time it demands. The fish is the hook, the equipment is the profit. So if physical products already carry decent margins, why have so many pet stores turned a big part of their floor space into services instead? Because services do something a bag of food never can. They can't be replicated by a website. This is the piece that has quietly become one of the most profitable parts of the modern pet store. Grooming hair and nails don't stop growing just because Amazon exists. A dog needs a haircut every 4 to 8 weeks, whether you order its food online or not. And grooming isn't priced like a product with a wholesale cost behind it. It's priced like labor, which means it can carry profit margins of 50 to 80 cents on every dollar, roughly double what most retail products earn. A single skilled groomer can typically work through somewhere around 6 to 8 appointments in a full day, and because the main cost is that groomer's wage rather than a wholesale product cost, most of what the customer pays past that wage drops straight to profit. Every grooming appointment also creates 2 separate store visits, one to drop the pet off and one to pick it up, and both of those visits are a chance for the owner to wander the aisles and pick up something else on the way out. A grooming salon that takes up around 15% of a store's floor space can end up generating 30 to 40% of that location's entire profit. That's an enormous return on a fairly small footprint, and grooming was really just the opening move. The bigger shift has been pet stores turning themselves into actual healthcare providers. Petco has built out more than 100 in-store veterinary hospitals under its Vetco Total Care brand, plus mobile vaccination clinics that travel between locations. PetSmart took a different route, partnering with Banfield Pet Hospital to run full veterinary clinics inside its stores nationwide. Why does this matter so much financially? Because people switch pet food brands constantly to save a couple of dollars, but almost nobody switches veterinarians once their pet has an established medical history there. Once a clinic has a pet's full record, its vaccination schedule, its allergy history, its blood work from 2 years ago, switching somewhere else means starting from zero, and most owners simply won't do that over a small price difference. Healthcare turns a one-time shopper into someone locked into that specific store for years. It also drives sales of prescription diets and medications, which carry margins of 40 to 55 cents on the dollar, and it opens the door to paid wellness memberships that bundle routine exams, grooming discounts, and store credit into one predictable monthly payment. Once a customer is paying that monthly fee, every other purchase they make in that store just feels like it's already been budgeted for. Now here's where the story turns, because none of this stops the giants from having an enormous structural advantage over the small independent shop down the street. Large national chains like Petco and PetSmart control somewhere around 40 to 47% of the entire pet store market in the United States, a market worth roughly $33 to $34 billion a year. They buy in such enormous volume that their wholesale costs can run 20 to 30% below what an independent store pays for the exact same products. They've built their own private label brands, which can carry margins of 50 to 65 cents on the dollar, because there's no outside brand taking a cut. They run distribution centers that supply both their physical stores and their online orders from the same warehouse network, which independents simply can't match. And they sit in prime real estate next to Target and Walmart, pulling in foot traffic they didn't have to earn on their own. On top of all of that, chains can absorb a bad month at one location because hundreds of other locations are still profitable, while an independent store with one bad month might not make rent. Scale doesn't just lower cost. It lowers risk. And in a business where a chunk of your inventory is alive and can get sick or die overnight, lowering risk is worth almost as much as lowering cost. Given all of that, how does the small pet store on the corner survive at all? By refusing to fight that battle in the first place. Independent stores generally can't win on price, so they compete on something the big chains structurally can't replicate: trust and specific knowledge. Many boutique pet food brands actually sign agreements that keep them out of big box stores and off major websites entirely, meaning the only place to get them is the independent shop. The staff at these stores are often the kind of people who actually know the difference between one dog breed's dietary needs and another's. And a customer dealing with a real problem, like a pet with allergies or a chronic illness, often wants to talk to a person rather than search the internet and guess which forum post to trust. That kind of advice doesn't show up on a spreadsheet, but it's exactly why a customer will drive past a big chain to reach a small shop where the person behind the counter already knows their pet's name and history. Independent stores also turn their physical space into a community hub, hosting adoption events with local shelters, breed meetups, and training classes, which builds a kind of loyalty that a national chain's app and points program can't fully replace. Still, no amount of community goodwill could fully protect physical stores from the next disruption, because the internet changed the game for everyone. Heavy, boring, predictable purchases, the giant bag of standard kibble, the tub of clay litter, moved online almost entirely. Companies like Chewy built their entire business around auto-ship subscriptions, quietly delivering the same order every month without the customer having to think about it, and without the customer ever having to drive anywhere or carry a 40-pound bag to their car. Younger pet owners adopted this fastest. More than 60% of Gen Z pet owners use some kind of automatic subscription for pet products, compared to under 40% of baby boomers. That is a direct hit to the exact category that used to bring people through a physical store's front door on a predictable, weekly basis. Think about what that actually removes from a store. It removes the walk-in customer who used to come in just for food, and while they were there, grabbed a toy, noticed a sale on treats, or asked a staff member a question about their pet's diet. Online auto-ship keeps the food transaction, but it deletes every one of those small, unplanned purchases that used to happen around it. That's a much bigger loss than the food revenue alone suggests, so stores had to change what they actually were. Many shrank the shelf space devoted to basic dry goods and expanded grooming rooms, self-serve dog wash stations, training areas, and veterinary suites instead. Things a website simply cannot deliver to your door. Others turn their physical locations into local pickup points, letting customers order online and grab it same day, which combines the convenience of the internet with the immediacy of a real store. And some leaned into heavy or perishable products, like frozen raw diets, that are simply too expensive to ship, giving the physical store a category that online competitors can't easily touch. Alongside the internet, there's been a second, quieter shift, this one about ethics rather than technology, and it has reshaped where live animals even come from. Public concern over so-called puppy mills, large-scale commercial breeding operations, has led multiple states to pass laws banning the retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in pet stores altogether. California, Maine, and Maryland have all passed versions of this kind of law, and more states have introduced similar bills since. Under these rules, stores can only display animals that come from rescue organizations or shelters, not commercial breeders, which flips the entire acquisition model for live animals upside down, almost overnight in those regions. Oddly enough, this has turned into a financial advantage for many stores rather than a burden. Partnering with a shelter for adoption events means the store never has to buy, house, or risk losing money on that animal in the first place, since the shelter owns it until it's adopted. Hosting these events also builds real goodwill and draws in shoppers who specifically want to support ethical adoption. And the moment that adoption happens, the store still captures that same high-margin onboarding basket, the crate, the food, the collar, without ever having spent $1 acquiring the animal itself. It's the emotional payoff of the puppy in the window, minus almost all of the financial risk that used to come with it. Once a store has earned that trust, the entire goal becomes keeping that customer coming back for years, and that's exactly what loyalty programs are built to do. Free loyalty programs collect purchase history and pet details at checkout, which lets a store send targeted reminders exactly when a customer is likely running low on food or due for a grooming visit. That sounds simple, but it means the store no longer has to hope a customer remembers to come back. It can prompt them at exactly the right moment before they've even thought about reordering somewhere else. Paid membership tiers go further, charging something like $20 a month in exchange for routine checkups, grooming discounts, and reward credit. And the data backs this up clearly. Customers enrolled in paid subscription programs tend to spend between 2.5 and 3.5 times more per year than customers who aren't. That gap alone tells you almost everything about why these programs exist. They aren't really about the $20 monthly fee. They're about converting an occasional shopper into someone with a standing automatic reason to keep coming back. The entire point of these programs isn't to win today's sale. It's to own the next 100 purchases over that animal's lifetime. Looking ahead, this whole industry seems to be drifting even further away from traditional retail and closer to healthcare. Smart collars are being developed that continuously track an animal's activity and vital signs, flagging potential health issues to the owner before they become expensive emergencies. Genetic testing is opening the door to nutrition formulated around a specific pet's own biology rather than a generic formula for the whole species. And some locations are experimenting with remote veterinary consultations available right on site, so a pet can get expert medical input without a separate trip to a clinic. Put all three of those together, and the direction is pretty clear. The store of the future looks less like a place you go to buy a bag of food, and more like a place that's quietly monitoring, feeding, and treating your pet across its entire life, with the retail floor just being the visible front end of that relationship. So what does a good year actually look like for a store running this whole model well versus a bad one? In a good year, food and hard goods sell steadily, the grooming chair stays booked out weeks in advance, the in-store clinic keeps a loyal base of medical customers coming back, and live animal losses stay low because inventory turns quickly and nothing sits around long enough to get sick. Under those conditions, a well-run independent store can land net profit margins in the range of 8 to 10%, which is solid for a retail business of this size. In a bad year, only one or two things need to go wrong to wipe most of that out. A disease outbreak moves through the aquarium section, and the store has to write off thousands of dollars in stock overnight. A key groomer quits and appointment slots sit empty for 2 months while a replacement gets trained. A big box competitor opens half a mile away and undercuts every commodity item the store used to rely on for foot traffic. Any one of those can push that same store from a comfortable 8% margin down toward 2% or into a loss for the year. And that gap between a good year and a bad year can easily be the difference between a store that's comfortably profitable and one that's barely surviving. Even though both stores might look identical from the sidewalk, the difference between a good year and a bad year in this business often isn't about working harder. It's almost entirely about how well a store has shifted its revenue away from live animals and commodity goods and toward the parts of the business that keep paying it back for years: food subscriptions, grooming chairs, and the veterinary suite down the hall. So here's the full picture, from the beginning to the end. A pet store looks, from the outside, like a place that sells animals. From the inside, it's a business built on a completely different foundation. The puppy in the window is rarely where the money is made. It's the emotional trigger that starts a relationship. The food, the toys, the grooming chair, and the vet's office down the hallway are where a store actually earns its living, spread out over years, sometimes over a decade or more, one visit at a time. Before we wrap up, if you want the deeper version of this, how businesses like this are actually structured, priced, and scaled step by step, there's a full business guide linked down in the description and pinned in the first comment. It's worth a look regardless of which industry you're most curious about. If this video helped you see pet stores a little differently, do like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching.